Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to get started. Thank you all so very much for being here. I'm Penelope Spicer Sidbury, the Wilmington City Clerk and staff person to the Commission on African American History. Just for FYI, this event is being broadcast live, and we're going to take a moment to welcome everyone. We're going to introduce our panelists in just a few minutes, but I wanted to let everyone know and be aware that this is being recorded and it is live. This is the Commission on African Americans History fifth installment series as they celebrate Emancipation Proclamation, housing and gentrification. And at this time, I'm going to introduce the committee chair of this particular committee, and she's going to talk about the occasion and why we're here. Kamika Sidbury.
Hi, everyone. This series started back in January, and this year's title is The Great Migration Back to Black Literary Societies. And so we started this series back in 2021, correct? And it was our Emancipation Proclamation series. So we think about Emancipation Proclamation, we are looking at freedom. And so this year we want to focus on the freedom of mind. And so with freedom of mind comes literacy and intellectual property. And so we started series in um, in January where we focused on the key aspects of the Emancipation Proclamation and how does literacy impact the church, especially the Black church. In February, we looked at literacy and Black literary societies and the lessons learned from them that can impact education. In March, we were supposed to focus on government, but we're gonna pull that one to a later date. But in April, we were able to look at mental health and trauma and understand healthcare literacy. And so now we are here in May. Yes. And we're looking at housing and gentrification and looking at financial literacy. Well, more so looking at how to be literate in understanding the housing laws and things like that. But literacy is a key aspect to everyone's well-being. Literacy is not just reading and writing, but it's what you do with what you read and what you write. It's how you advocate, it's how you give voice, and you are able to promote yourself within your community. And so we want to celebrate the key aspects of literacy and intellectual excellence and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sidbury. We will follow the program. First, want to apologize. Two of our panelists, Ms. Adele Bernard, had an emergency and is not able to be with us. But Mr. Willie Black, who is one of our commission members and also works with Adele, is going to sit in on her behalf. And Mr. Tiger Aldrich had an emergency with his mom, so he's not going to be with us. But we are sure that the folks that we do have that's going to be with us is going to really deliver some great information. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Tyrone Garrett, Chief Executive Officer of the Wilmington Housing Authority. He oversees all Wilmington Housing Authority operations, including public housing and housing choice vouchers operations, manages a real estate development program, and serves as principal liaison with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He also stewards the authority's financial operation and leads a staff of over 70. He focuses on public-private partnerships, including cultivating relationships with the City of Wilmington and New Hanover County. Mr. Garrett has more than 27 years of experience as a senior executive in public housing and municipal government. He has spearheaded transformation plans to preserve, stabilize, and redevelop portfolios in both the District of Columbia and Long Branch, New Jersey, while also designated as a troubleshooter for multiple agencies. With this knowledge, he has offered subject matter expertise through national presentations, lectures, along with corporate and civic board participation. Mr. Garrett received his BA in history from the University of Virginia and was awarded a Juris Doctorate from the Rutgers University School of Law. He also conducted further study at Harvard University John F. Kennedy School of Government and remains an instructor for Rutgers University Center for Government Services. Will we please welcome Mr. Tyrone Garrett?
I'm introducing our next panelist. Mr. Leo Wilson has worked in education for over 18 years. He has served as a special education teacher, paraeducator, bus driver, and girls basketball coach. Currently, he works as a community resource coordinator with Link and with Link Inc., which means leading into new communities. Mr. Wilson is an Army veteran and a graduate of Mount Olive University. Mr. Wilson is married with two daughters, ages 17 and 15, and one son, age 11 years old. He enjoys working with people, traveling, children, basketball, sports, and spending time with his family. Mr. Wilson is also an elder and a member of the Salvation and Deliverance Family Worship Center. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Willie Black. Mr. Willie Black serves on the City of Wilmington's Commissioner on African American History. He is also a broker in charge at Bernard and Associates Realty. He has been a realtor for 17 years. He is a native Wilmingtonian. He's a history buff and an architectural enthusiast. All right, thank you, Mr. Willie Black. Go ahead. You ready? All right. So, just understanding panelists that we create here within our subcommittee group are often, they are targeted. So they are targeted. We get someone who may specialize in housing, whether it is through realty work or it is through housing authority. Just looking at two different aspects of it. And also someone who is involved in the process, a citizen. And so when we start looking at our panelists, the diversity of their answers come with their lived experiences. So that's where we want to make sure that we understand how different perspectives come from different areas based on who's answering the question. All right. All right. Y'all ready?
Yes.
I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Garrett. Good evening.
Good evening.
How do gentrification and development affect the future of marginalized communities within the city?
Wow. And I'm glad thank you for the question. And I am glad you made that first statement because my viewpoint versus what others may think will be drastically different. The reason being, as a housing authority CEO, I've always been intentional about the creation and preservation of affordable housing. And that may be different than what other developers, other organizations, other communities want to see. So for me, when I'm entrusted with the opportunity to create affordable housing, there are things that we want to make happen. And one of those things is to ensure that there is an affordability level for all the residents that may have to relocate during that time frame, the opportunity for them to actually return, and then the ability to create additional affordable housing units. So when we talk about gentrification and marginalized communities, that really doesn't play into my game plan and my approach to the creation and preservation of housing, because always on my mind is how do we keep it? And how do we increase those numbers for communities such as Wilmington or communities throughout the United States who are suffering the big crunch with the creation and preservation of affordable housing across the board, based on economics, based on ethnicity, whatever it may be. I know what that looks like from my vantage point. So for me, I try to prevent it at every step of the way and talk about it just in forums and situations like this, and panels and discussions with city officials and members of the community, the development community as a whole, to try and encourage them and let them understand what is necessary and what's needed, and also to reinforce the creation of affordable housing is not a burden for the community. It is something that is necessary and needed for all of us to be able to live our lives and raise our families, and that's important. That I reiterate that, I have that conversation and be very intentional, as I said, and direct when advocating on behalf of my residents.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Wilson, you ready?
Yes.
All right. How do gentrification and development affect the future of marginalized communities within the city?
I just think about the scripture, Hosea 4:6, and clause A says we perish for lack of knowledge because we reject knowledge. So I think the knowing of how to get affordable housing, to get people to invest, because one of our greatest investments is housing because it appreciates a house or land. So just getting the information out there to the average citizen, the jobs, getting the people to know the information so they can be able to pass what they have on to the next generation, on to the children's children, and wealth will be built, and just keep the generational wealth going rather than you having something, you own it, and then selling it. But I just think that's one of our greatest investments, land slash housing. So that was like my response to that.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Black, you ready?
Yes.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
And now, as a realtor and a property manager, I see the effects of gentrification on a daily basis. Um, for one thing, the rental rates have gone through the roof. Housing prices are at their highest. And I see communities that are starting to change. They're they're less diverse. They are they're a little more affluent, and gentrification is having an effect on future generations of people who say you're native to Wilmington, your parents own the house, uh, you your parents decide to sell this house. You're probably the last generation of diverse people that will live in that house.
Mhm.
And I see this in every neighborhood in Wilmington. And it's it's lack of education, it's a lack of planning. It's across the board.
Stuff like that. Okay. So now, Mr. Wilson, I'm gonna start with you. Okay. What services do you feel need to be put in place for every citizen to have the opportunity to have affordable, sustainable, and safe housing?
I think workshops, politics, the cost of what people make, the minimum wage could go up, and just people having the information, just knowing the information, debt ratio, um, nice areas, schools. I think all of that plays a part in it because, like I just said, I mean, if the information is out there, but only a certain people are getting the information, then that's not what it needs to be. So we can have it equal abroad, and then there wouldn't be so many impoverished areas and people who are selling their houses. What are they going to go to? Because what you had, and if you sell it, you may not get the same thing because of what the market is. So just having that information. So those services, whether it's through my job, Link, whether it's through real estate agents, realtors, putting the information out and putting maybe laws into place, politics, and people just getting the information out there so you can help the average citizens, especially those who are that middle, lower socioeconomic status that can be beneficial to the community as a whole. Because if your community is thriving, then it helps out the parents, it helps out the school system, it helps out the children, and it just be a diverse community and all. So yeah, just the information.
All right. Mr. Black.
And just to piggyback off of Mr. Wilson's answer, um, it's very important to be financially literate. You have people that, most people don't understand credit. They
Mhm.
don't understand different forms of credit. They don't understand debt. They don't understand the importance of, paying debt. Um, we do need programs and we do need, you know, services, workshops. We definitely need different ways to educate people when it comes to being financially literate.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Black. You ready?
Yeah, I am. I have to come from a different angle because what Mr. Wilson was referring to, I see more as the home ownership concept, right?
Mm.
So for my model, I put home ownership on the back end. It's not the priority for a housing authority to create home ownership opportunities, more so for a housing authority to create opportunities that develop safe, decent, and affordable housing, right? And figure out a way to manage it and preserve it. In saying that, what does it take? It takes will, because the creation of affordable housing can't be created without funding. And some people run away from that, but that's our reality. That's always been our reality. The reason housing authorities haven't been able to necessarily thrive or are having trouble now is because it wasn't always funded at the capital level that it needed to be able to be preserved, and they've aged out. So now creation of more affordable housing or the redevelopment of affordable housing from a housing authority perspective requires funding. And it requires everyone in the community, public-private partnerships, to recognize and understand exactly how that funding needs to be generated and created. It can't be all on one group or the other. And once that conversation is had and that understanding is accepted, then there can be additional units, the units that are necessary and needed in any community to be built. And so again, I just think it takes a will and a clear understanding, because for me, someone may come up and say, well, why are you building market rate units in the mix of your development plan? And I'll explain that the market rate units are what's going to drive my additional affordable units. The market rate units are what's going to drive the subsidy so I can have lower income units at a lower AMI rate of 30% or below and be able to fund them without having to utilize private funding or private equity from the market, or having to go to taxpayers or the municipal government to ask for more funding. If I can create some market rate units, the market rate units internally based on that performer create its own subsidy. But having that understanding, explaining that to people, and having people also be open-minded and willing to listen is also important. So it's the will to put some ideas on the table, and it's also a will to listen.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Garrett. All right, Mr. Black. What would be your advice to families to ensure homes are transferable from one generation to another?
Definitely plan ahead, see an estate planner, generate a will. As we know, most people die intestate. They don't have wills. So then you have properties that have multiple heirs. The heirs can't agree on what to do with the property. And so that's where you run into your most problems is, not having a will or a trust or some kind of estate planning.
All right. So you want to answer that question, or I can give you another question? Because you're my next person to come speak.
I can answer that question.
Okay, all right.
I can have some input. I don't know if I'm going to have the answer.
Okay.
I think, but
Well, you can answer from a personal standpoint instead of from professional.
from
Okay.
where we are, I think it's important for individuals to even get to that point. They need to build an education and be able to economically grow within their family structure. Without being able to do that from the beginning, won't allow them the opportunity to pass anything down.
Yeah.
So there's an education component that starts outside of just outside of how to keep a checkbook.
Yeah.
It starts with education where I can advance my family based on my abilities and my capacity to earn a living at a level that will allow me to purchase a home or do something that is different, that I'll have an opportunity to pass something down in terms of a legacy to other families or to family members or to children.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Wilson,
Same question.
same question. What would your advice be to families to ensure homes are transferable from one generation to another?
I most definitely agree with having a will, and just if the family before you establish it and it's paid off, my concept would be why not just keep it in the family? You own it, it's paid for, it should be in a nice area, it should be appreciating, and just pass it down. Because like I said earlier, if you sell it, I mean, or you can go back and get into another 30-year mortgage or 15-year mortgage, or you can be able to pay it off. But I just think that's, like I said, one of our greatest investments is a house or a land. And like how you said, how the concept of family is just it's changed now. So whatever a family looks like, just passing that information down and just keeping it within the family, because ownership is just vital. I feel I can do more with my money rather than just going out different ways. And if I'm understanding having multiple streams of revenue or income, then I can be beneficial to my family and I can assist them, because that's one of the one of the biggest bills you have is a mortgage or rent. So if you can have that out of the way, what more can you do with your money? You can have your money make money rather than working for your money. You're not equating dollars with hours. So if we understand that, then we can keep something in the family, just keeping it passed down, generational wealth, to where it just keeps going. And I believe that each generation should get better. So where my parents, where they made it and they're still alive, I should be going greater and farther and faster. And my children can take it to a next level. And it's my job as a parent to educate them, not just school or when it comes to housing and certain things I know, to educate them and they see it. I epitomize, I exemplify what it is to be um, home ownership and what it is, because certain things you're not gonna learn that in K-12. So that'll be my idea for that. Yeah, just keep it in the family.
All right, so let's come back to Mr. Garrett. Why is it important to be financially literate when it relates to housing needs? So,
You have to be able to provide for your family, right?
Mhm.
You're going to have to create a budget. So anyone, whether or not they're in an affordable unit or if they're in a market rate unit, they're in a home or a condo, whatever it may be, eh, many of us have to budget
Mhm.
and understand exactly where our money is going. And as Mr. Wilson said, can we figure out a way to make our money work for us in some way? And, passive streams of revenue may be an idea and a concept. For other people, it just may be lowering debt so
Mhm.
that there is not that type of pressure on a household so that you can afford to save for other things that may be out there. So having the opportunity to be financially literate is vital, especially if you're on if your income isn't built to be able to withstand all the blows that are out there in the community right now and in the world. You have to know exactly what's most important, what are vital expenses versus things that you don't necessarily need at that particular time.
Same question, Mr. Wilson. Why is it important to be financially literate when it relates to housing needs?
What we don't know can hurt us. If we know better, we can do better. Something my mother used to always say. And if you understand just how that works, I mean, so I have a house, and I sold one house, and there's certain things that my realtor, the guy that helped me sell the house, he explains to me, okay, this is how this works. He explained to me debt ratio, okay, how houses appreciate, and okay, what a modular do compared to a stick built or brick built house. So if we know, then we can teach other people. We can tell other people, to each one teach one. So I have responsibility. It's just important though, because if you're illiterate, you don't know. But if you're literate, you have the information, just not reading and writing, but just in different businesses ventures where you can help and your dollar be more beneficial to you, to your family, to the community as a whole. So we know better, we do better. And sometimes it's best to search out the information. I mean, Google University, YouTube. So the information is out there. And as I said earlier, that one of my responsibilities actually for that, we perish for lack of knowledge because we reject knowledge. So information like money is currency. It's current. It's always flowing. But are you getting in the midst to figure out what it is and how you can be a help to yourself? Some people's not going to give it to you. You got to go find it out. You got to go seek it and find it.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Black.
And I agree with, with both of my members up here. But I'm going to say that it is very important to start out with financial literacy at home. I think when families talk about finances, when you show your children, how to balance an account, you take them to the bank with you, show them how to have relationships with people in banks. I think that I think it starts at home, and then you grow from there. So, I mean, just like everyone else on the panel was saying, you have debt, you have credit that you need to understand. But I think that all starts, with just just everyday talks, everyday talks around the dinner table, everyday talks at home about finances and the bills, and I have to pay the mortgage every month. I mean, I know so many young people that don't have that concept. They don't understand, that bills have to be paid, and they don't understand where the money comes from either. So so I think that's where it starts. It starts, with parents or adults teaching their children, about financial literacy.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna, I'm gonna do a round robin, give you a time to do additional remarks. But I want to first make this one, came because I was studying and looking in a book and was reading about Hillcrest and how Wilmington Housing Authority got started and housing projects. And one of the key aspects was subpar housing was an issue in Wilmington back during that time frame. So housing authority or housing projects got started because they allow people to have well-maintained housing. And so when we look at well-maintained housing, housing projects were that place. They provided educational centers within that. Young people went to Boy Scouts. And so these were middle-class working people living, transferring from subpar housing within the Wilmington community to go to stay in housing projects. And so when we think about that now, Hillcrest, which is in the news right now for being developed, or land or whatever else, and that was one of the key aspects. Veterans were staying in Hillcrest, or those who were Black ship workers. And so they were asked to buy a house. And so when we're not literate and when we don't read policy, then the Congress denied it. So they were not ever able to buy homes. And this was back in 1938.
Mhm.
And so think about how different that could look now. And so when we start, housing is our biggest cost. To buy a home or to even rent a home, or that cost, whether it's subsidized or anything, that is our largest cost. And so just to be more informed, because if you don't have it, you're homeless. And whether you are staying doubling up or whatever else. So to have this conversation, that was one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation. And that's why, yes, Wilmington Housing Authority is important in this conversation because it came out of a place to provide a safe place to allow people to transfer from Wilmington Housing Authority into buying their own home. I mean, into their buying their own home. And so it was not a stopping point, but a building point so people can raise money. And it's just significant to the community. And those were some of the questions. I mean, that was the reasoning for this conversation on housing and gentrification, because right now we can't afford it. All right. And so I just want to those were our 4 questions, but we want you to have opportunity to give additional context on this topic that you don't feel was touched, or anything that you want the public to know about what's going on with the housing authority, that you say, okay, well, these are some of the plans for the future, just anything.
Well, I can tell you right now, the authority itself is going through a major physical needs assessment. So we have consultants on board now looking at all of our properties to make determinations about what can actually be preserved, to give us what that dollar amount actually looks like for preservation, and what direction we can actually go in, whether it be a major rehabilitation or if it has to be something more drastic, such as a demolition and a rebuild. Hillcrest is an example of that. It's over 80 years old. It has outlived its life expectancy based on not only the way it was built, but also the infrastructure itself. If you date back to 1938 when it was constructed, right around that time, we're talking about clay pipes for water and sewer and different things like that. Those pipes decay. I explain it to people all the time. When those pipes decay, they decay internally and clog. They don't break apart like PVC. And so to replace those pipes is very expensive, and infrastructure creates that type of capital improvement that's necessary and needed. But let me just jump to the point that I made earlier about being intentional about what you put back there. First and foremost for Hillcrest, it's residents have the right to return. residents, if we can possibly and physically and financially build first, we will, so we can minimize displacement. And then the goal is to build additional affordable units within that. There are approximately 256 units at Hillcrest now. Our goal is to build at least 700 units in total, if not more, with a multitude of those being financially, giving people the financial ability to afford them. And so that's a major push for Hillcrest that we want to try and work on within the next year, and somewhat complete. And then we're looking at other properties such as Houston Moore as a redevelopment opportunity for us, because that is right behind Hillcrest in terms of age and need. Solomon Towers is our senior building. That is important to us, but for senior buildings, we want to preserve it. It is something that we do a rehabilitation with residents in place so that we minimize their displacement and keep them stable. We know that moving residents, especially when you're dealing with seniors outside of their environment, causes a lot of trauma for them. And then overall with the agency, as I kind of close this out, is that just identifying and going back to the basics. And for me, what that means is managing the properties the proper way. In the past, housing authorities across the country have gotten away from it, managing the properties in a manner that is consistent with what people want in order to build quality lives for their families. And that's something that we're striving to do right now. And it's somewhat of a quote. We want to be courteous, clean, and complete, but we also want to just get back to the basics of what housing used to be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garrett. Mr. Wilson, is there anything you would like to add on the topic of housing and gentrification, or just anything?
I just want to
Relates. All right.
thank you for inviting me to the housing and gentrification panel discussions. New experience, so I thank you for that. And I just think it starts with us. You can't necessarily depend on the local, state, federal government. It starts with us getting fresh ideas, and we, the people, the government, we, the people, that's really the government, tell politicians and people what we need, and tapping into entrepreneur resources and getting what we want and the people. And I think about veterans, 'cause I'm a veteran. I think about the homeless people. I think about communities that we had that were vibrant, that was thriving, now aren't like that, and that we speaking out in the upkeep of those places. And even through gentrification, how, okay, you're building up, but you're driving certain people away. So where do they go? So it's almost like a cycle. So it's up, down, haves and have-nots. I believe it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. I think it can be better and different, but it just starts with us and our mindsets, renewed mindsets, and making it happen. So I thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me, and it's really important because I like the New Hanover, Brunswick area. Moved out here after I got the Army, and the community is growing. Brunswick County is growing. New Hanover is growing. People are moving out here, just not Charlotte and Raleigh. So I think we need to have an infrastructure to invite people in, have things so they can come in and play a part in it, and that everybody can benefit, not just a certain group of people.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Black.
Well, I just want to thank you for letting me fill in as a panelist. And I'm just glad that we're having this discussion on gentrification. It's a topic that's not discussed enough in this community. And I just feel like it's better to have these conversations, get this information out there to folks. And that's why this was a good panel. And I'm glad we, got this information out there.
As everyone knows, these discussions are just a surface. And so please have deeper conversations when you go into your various places. Thank you so much. We are, Ms. Penelope Spicer Sidbury is here.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Sidbury. Thank you all for being here. We're going to conclude, but before we do, our chairman, who was delayed, Evan Bryan, is going to probably close us out with some closing remarks. But before we get there, I want to say thank you again to the panelists. I want to say thank you. My council member, Kevin Spears, is in the audience. So glad he's here. He's been to just about every one of these series, and so we're so forever grateful for him. FYI, the commission members besides Mr. Willie and Miss Evelyn and Kamika, we have Atiba Johnson, Brandon Hickman, Raymond Davis, Sierra Washington, LaShonda Teague, and Chakima Quintana. They are also members of this board, and we're so grateful for them. I'm going to ask Chairman Evan Bryant to come and give us some closing remarks and say whatever it is you'd like to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So let's give our panelists another round of applause. And I'd like to thank you for your willingness to participate in our 5th installment of an Emancipation Proclamation series. Thank you to the audience who is here, not only here in person, but those who are watching faithfully. And thank you to the City of Wilmington staff, and more so thank you to our moderator, Ms. Kamika Sidbury, who continues to bring us so much information, thought-provoking information. So thank you. The purpose of the City of Wilmington's Commission on African American History is to plan, develop, and implement community projects to recognize and increase the awareness of the contributions of African Americans to Wilmington's history, to encourage and assist African American history, to recognize sites in the community that are significant to African American history. Our meetings are held on the first Monday of each month at 4 p.m. is in City Council chambers. So if you get an opportunity to come and be a part of that, please do. Once again, this has been a very unique and interesting, and I'm so glad to be a part of it because this is our, second year that we have done a series is on the Emancipation Proclamation. And I really like it because it continues to bring history to our community. And once again, thank you for coming. And that's it. Have a good evening.
Sorry. We announced the final installment, the 6th one.
Yes.
Sorry.
So we have one more installment. It's the 6th community literacy, and it will be held on June the 15th at 12 noon at the MLK Center. This will be a culmination of transfer from the Emancipation Proclamation to Juneteenth. So if you weren't a part of our event the last time we did this, it was almost like we passed the baton. So we go from the Emancipation Proclamation to Juneteenth. So I hope that you can be a part of that, invite your friends, family, and it's going to be real fun. Thank you again.